All right, so as we start here, our look at World War One. One of the things that we need to do is we need to break this war into some manageable chunks. So, what I like to do is I like to look at the war in sort of these four aspects. Um, and in order to understand something as huge as a world war, I think that's important. So for us, our first look is going to be at what I call long range causes. So the idea here is that before there was any fighting, before there was a war or any declaration, what were the circumstances or conditions that made it possible for a war to even exist? So we'll call those long range causes. All right. So these are things that happened long before the war itself began. All right. So that's the focus here of the our first look at this war. So we're going to determine that, or at least most historians have acknowledged that there were sort of five significant long-range causes that made this war possible. Now, if we're in class, we'd be talking about this picture right now. But I just will say, this is one of the most photographed wars in history, or at least to this point in time. Okay, the photography had existed, wars had been photographed, but there's a wealth of knowledge that we've gained as historians through this photographic evidence here of the war. And you can see this is a fairly typical picture that reflects, I think, what this war was all about. And it's fairly grim. And it's certainly quite violent, very brutal, and this is the sort of thing that would not have been plastered across newspapers back in Canada during the war, and you can think about what reasons might be for that. But ultimately, pictures like this here sort of help us understand what this war really was all about. So we're going to just move ahead here and take a look at our first cause of the war. All right, so I will ask that you copy down these notes here, so the text as you can see here, and that'll be a good way for you to keep your studies in order, because there will be a test at the end of things. Okay, so our first cause is this, the cause of what is just simply called industrialism. All right, and this was something that began almost 100 years before World War One officially begins, and we see a dramatic changeover in initially in Europe and in England specifically, where this process of converting into mechanized labor began. And steam power was the first way of doing this, and then this led to an explosion of railways and people moving all throughout the countryside, because they didn't have to live near waterways to get around. There's a dramatic transformation that happens in the countryside in England initially. But it's the process here of changing from factory type production to moving away from an individual or a craftsman sort of building things by hand into this mode or method of mass production, where machines were replacing workers, and in some cases machines were performing tasks that human hands could not. And we'll see that over the course of the 19th century, that this process of industrialism moves throughout Europe. So countries like England, and then France, and then we see Germany, and all of Europe, essentially all of Western Europe, certainly begins to adopt some form or means of industrial production. And where that's important in the context of World War One is that we begin to see weapons produced, and new weapons unlike weapons that had been ever used in previous wars. And we'll take a look at a picture here so we can just see, get an idea. Look at this guy, big muscular guy here, but he's dwarfed by this enormous machine that was, he was working on. And here's a product that was produced during World War One for the first time, a new invention, and we'll talk about what this is. You can take a guess at what this might be, and if you take a keen look here, you might be able to figure out that this is in fact a World War One tank. The first time tanks were ever used was in fact in this war, and you get a sense of just how many of them there are here, like a sheer number of tanks. And this is a typical sort of warehouse here that would have stockpiled machinery and war machinery like this. All right, and there were hundreds of them scattered throughout Europe. And this one here, this is a great picture. There's much going